Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this Friday afternoon I'm joined by Sean Connolly all the way from Australia and Kevin McCluskey, who is dialing in from Hungary, lads. And it seems like a while since we did this because generally speaking, you guys join me on a match day and we're just coming out of an international break. Sean, it's about time, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like football was never going to come back, or real football, I should say. The international football is just really not catered for people like me. Every game is on at like 3, 4 in the morning, and these are absolutely nothing games. Fair enough, I got up for the Euros, but I'm not getting up to watch Scotland now, Portugal now, and I'm glad I didn't get up to watch that in the middle of the night. Yeah, I'm really going off, really going off this international football since they changed the format of it. Bring me back Saturday 3 p.m s. These midday Celtic games are great for me down here. Not so much the evening games.
It just seems to be encroaching on club football, Kevin. Am I being selfish? Probably. But it's not just once or even twice a season. And you just get started and then there's this international break. You're obviously worried about the wellness of your players and the fitness of your players. And it's just great to have the club football back. That's my take on it, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of in Sean's boat on this one. I don't look forward to the international break at all. Watching Scotland, I want to see them win the game, but I couldn't really care less if they don't. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm more interested in did the Celtic players that are away for all the respective nations get through the games fine and come back and be ready for whatever game comes up at the weekend. And obviously this one's the big one, top two in the country facing off. So yeah, I'm really not one for these international breaks, and it's great to get back and, like Sean said, talk about real football, because I mean it's Celtic that binds us together. It's not Scotland.
Well, see, this is a big thing. I've been criticised for this, and we'll actually talk about a player who was criticised for not playing for Scotland, and Aiden McGeady. But it's an emotional thing, football, for me, Sean. And I always remember, going through that kind of early period when Scotland were qualifying for World Cup after World Cup, and you did get invested in that. I remember my family, cousins, uncles, etc., all went to Italia 90, and I was meant to go, and I didn't go, and I was disappointed. But as I've got a wee bit older, that emotional kind of link to Scotland, what the SFA stands for, I'm seriously not that bothered. Emotionally, if I wake up the following day and Scotland have been, I don't know, held to nothing, each draw at Hampden, or they've been beaten 2-0 away from home, it doesn't ruin my day. It doesn't really have that impact on me, Sean. So I can't lie that when Celtic play, I'm emotionally attached to that and involved and invested for days and days leading up to it and for days afterwards. I can't say that for a country when it comes to football.
I think the social nature of it's really changed for me being outside Scotland as well. Like when I lived and worked in Scotland, you worked with guys that supported Rangers, as they were known back then, and guys you liked, guys you were friends with. But if there was a Celtic Rangers game, you couldn't see them for 3 days, right? You had to avoid them because if you won, they didn't want to see you, and if they won, you didn't want to see them. But then when there was a Scotland game on, you could all come together and go to the pub, and that was great. But nowadays, being down in Australia, it's really just an absolute chore to get up for it. So yeah, it's not the same thing for me. I do think it is uniting in Scotland. I think out with it's just, I don't know, it's honestly a chore to do it nowadays.
Yeah, by the way, it just means that we want the club football back as quickly as possible, and we're getting it, and we're getting it this weekend in the form of, and I put it in the tagline, not to wind anybody up, Kev, because I truly believe it, this is Celtic's biggest domestic test of the season so far. Do you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
I was looking back to educate myself a little bit on Aberdeen and the run coming into this. They've won all 13 games they've played so far this season. They're unbeaten over 90 minutes in their last 23 games. Obviously, we knocked them out of the Scottish Cup, but that was on penalties. So over a 90-minute, even 120 minutes in that occasion, couldn't beat them. Their last defeat in a competitive game was in March, 13th of March, against Dundee away. So this is a massive game. It is a massive game. This is the biggest test of the season. You're coming into a side that's flying. They're full of confidence. They've won 7 out of 7 in the league, same as us. If they win the game, they go 3 points clear. If they draw the game, they stay level with us. They've got so much riding on this game as well. So have we. So it's a massive game. And not to wind up anyone from the other side of the city, it is a bigger game than when we played Rangers earlier on in the season, in terms of we already had a lead over them. We don't have a lead over Aberdeen. This could be the first time this season we get that. And if we win it, which you'll be confident we can, it lays down another marker for us going forward. But it's a huge game. The biggest disappointment from it all for you guys will be that it's not on TV back in Scotland, whereas I'm fairly sure Arena 4 is going to show the game over here in Hungary. So I think that's a sickener for guys that can't get to the game, but definitely biggest domestic test so far, for sure.
Well, a lot of people will say it's not the biggest game, Sean, but in terms of the test, I think that we won comfortably against Rangers, and going into this game, a big part of it for me is momentum. Now, if you go toe-to-toe and you go through that Aberdeen side and you see how many of them would maybe get into your starting 11 at Celtic, etc., you might say we're a lot stronger. But they have that momentum, that confidence, and they're building a winning culture at Aberdeen under this manager who's done so well. So that's where I'm coming from when I say it's the biggest test. Do you subscribe to that yourself, Sean? Do you think Rangers have been and will be the biggest test?
Yeah, I think confidence and momentum are huge. Ability is one thing, but I think confidence and momentum are also a big part of that. I think if you think back to when Jim Goodwin was the Aberdeen manager and they were on a great run, and then they parked the bus against us and Cal McGregor scored a late goal. They lost 1-0. And that was the beginning of the end for Jim Goodwin. He never really recovered from that. Their confidence got rocked by that. I think, though, when we play them on Saturday, tomorrow, that they will... The thing is, I think there's not going to be massive change to their system. Even though they've been winning games, they've not been hammering teams, right? They've been winning games 2-1, 1-0, 2-0, stuff like that. So they've been built on a solid foundation at the back. And again, they've not created a lot of chances. Their XG is relatively low. They've been very efficient. Their XGA is very... their goals conceded is much lower than their XGA. So they're really going against what the stats say they should be getting. So I feel there is going to be a regression for them. I just hope that it starts tomorrow because, as you say, they really are going like a juggernaut. Certainly, look, if we had that kind of record that Aberdeen got, we'd be crowing about it. If Lazarus FC had that kind of record, it'd be all over the red tops. So we can't underestimate it. They are a team full of international players with a great manager that's on a great run, and it's going to be a challenge. Even though there is an obvious gap in ability, it's still going to be a very difficult game. We need to be our best, and they're going to come and show their best.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the biggest talking points, of course, which we hope will be confirmed by Brendan Rodgers later on or even during this next 45 minutes or so, is that Cameron Carter-Vickers will make the cut, if you like, in terms of being available for this game, Kevin. We continually go on about Cameron Carter-Vickers, and it's almost like, it's followed by how important he is to the team and how he's their best defender and all this, which I agree he is. But this season's been very stop-start for him. I mean, I have said already our most consistent performer defensively this season's been Liam Scales. But in saying all that, I want Carter-Vickers in the team. He is our rock, and that goes back the 3 seasons actually now that he's played for Celtic, one as a loan player, 2 permanently. He is a mainstay, he's a cornerstone, and we've built our success around Cameron Carter-Vickers. But he has been in and out the team this season. If he's fit, do you throw him right in with one eye on the Atalanta game next week as well?
Yeah, that's the big question for this weekend in terms of team selection. Because over the last 3 seasons that he's been here, if we've got Cameron Carter-Vickers in the team, we tend not to lose games, especially domestically, because he's got that presence and aura at the back. He's a colossus, so you obviously want him there. But the points that you make as well, that this season it's been very stop-start for him, even from the tail end of last season. Liam Scales has stepped up to probably be the number 1 centre-back at the moment, which is almost a ridiculous thing to say considering what our thoughts were about him probably at this point last year, but he stepped up massively. So I don't necessarily think now there's as much of a necessity to rush Carter-Vickers back in. If there's any doubt over his fitness for tomorrow, leave him out. And let's hope that the 11 that start the game can get us to a point whereby 60, 65, 70 minutes, we've got the game won, and he can come on and get a run out towards the end. I think that's how I'd kind of manage him. And for Trusty being the other one, well, we've signed him for £6 million or whatever it is. We probably need to start trusting him, pardon the pun, to play in these kind of games. It's a big game. Like you said, biggest domestic test of the season. Let's see how he can stand up to that as well. And if he does it, then he gives us something else to think about for Wednesday night against Atalanta.
It's a great point that you make there, by the way, and I'm going to throw this over to you, Sean, in relation to the form of Liam Scales and the fact that we've shelled out £6 million for Trusty. It does give us that wee bit of leeway that perhaps we've not had before, whereby going into any big game, if Carter Vickers is fit, you throw him right in because we needed him and we relied on him. But I think Kev makes a good point there. Not only has Scales played so well, we brought in Trusty to play, and you're going to have to trust him. You really are for the big games against Aberdeen, for example. Do you agree with that? Would you rest Carter Vickers if there's any doubt about match sharpness, which of course there will be if you've been out for a few weeks?
That would be my. Obviously, we don't see behind the scenes, but yeah, that's what I would be leaning to. My instinct says they stick with Scales and Trusty. It's funny, right? Because obviously, when we had Starfelt and CCV playing, there was all the chat. We need a left-sided. We need a left-footed player. Now we've got two left-footed players playing centre back. So there's an argument there, to get CCV in, and there's also an argument to say that Scales played 180 minutes for Ireland. Trusty played 7 minutes and CCV didn't even travel. So there's a strong debate there that CCV should be fresher in a sense, but I think his match sharpness won't be there. And we've seen times in the past where his match sharpness has been off, and he's, for example, the start of this season, like Scales looked the better defender than CCV in the first few games. So I think you're probably right. I think we do go Scales and Trusty, and that would be my choice.
Yeah, Henrik Larsson, you miss Jim Orr. We all miss Jim Orr, Henrik. We all miss Jim Orr. And we're going to be talking about the man in your avatar at some point during this particular hour. And by the way, Jim Orr will be back next week. You only have to miss him, every now and again. He does come back to give us his words of wisdom. Jungle Line already coming in. He'll take 1-0 tomorrow, so would I. Jungle Line, no doubt about it. Gordon Coney, afternoon Acsom. I'm very confident for tomorrow, and I think we will show why we are the best team in the league. Aberdeen, as well as they have done, haven't faced a test like Celtic. Yes, absolutely get that, but I still think it's our biggest test. Just looking at the comments yesterday, thanks everybody for getting involved. We threw out a few questions and queries and asked you for your view on it. We asked you in relation to the arrival of Paul Tisdale and whether or not this is a sign that Celtic are dragging our recruitment strategy into the 21st century. We also asked about Aiden McGeady and how he ranked in terms of youth graduates over the last 20 years. Some brilliant comments on that. I would say that he divides opinion among some of the fan base, does Aiden, Kevin. But what I did see yesterday was a lot of positive comments coming in, going on about the sheer quality and talent of this young player. Some people thought that his move to Spartak Moscow might have been the wrong move. I'm not sure about that. We played Champions League football for them. He was a regular in the Ireland squads whilst he was playing for them. What's your take on it? Because we were getting people ranking like their top five, and in their top five were the likes of Callum McGregor, James A. Forrest, Kieran Tierney, maybe come back to him later on. Sean Maloney was in there as well, and of course, Aiden McGeady. Where do you rank him last 2 decades?
He's definitely in the top five, and probably my top five is the order that you've just listed them there. I don't know if that was by design or by default, but I think that's probably how I would rank them. McGeady is the guy that he's always going to divide opinion, because we could all see the potential that he had, and I don't think he really fulfilled it. And I think that's where the opinion divides. It's like he had a really good career with us, and then he had a good or a decent career away from us, but he really could have achieved so much more. The move to Spartak, I think, was a bad move for him, actually. And I'll use the example of one of the Hungarian players, Balázs Dzsudzsák, who made a move at the similar time, I think, to Dynamo Moscow. And he was slated for it here because it was he was another guy with so much potential, could have went to play, he left PSV at the time, could have went to play for anyone, more or less, in Spain or England or Germany. He had so much potential, went there, was off the radar, and just his career was decent after that, but fizzled out, never hit the potential. And I think McGeady was similar. I know he played, 99 games for Ireland, which is an achievement not to be sniffed at. I'm not sure how much competition there was for places up against him at the time. And then his career in England was fairly average. But when he was with us, he was such an exciting prospect. And he was a player that you enjoyed going to watch. He'd frustrate you because there was times he would not beat his man all game, but then there were other games where he would absolutely run the show. And that's what you get from a player like that.
Yes, the thing for me, the point I was trying to make yesterday was that he had the talent to be the best of them all. But then you look at someone probably like Callum McGregor, who's a good example, Sean, whereby he's got undoubted talent, but he's not got that natural gift, that flair, the skill that McGeady had as a young boy, whereby, he was being chased by every club in Britain. And Celtic did very, very well when he was a young boy to get him signed up. They would go on tournaments, and I mentioned the Charlie Mulgrew comments yesterday, where he would be the player of the tournament all over Europe, regardless of who they were playing and who was involved. But at one particular tournament, a friend of mine was telling me that he was working with the Celtic youth team at the time, and Liam Brady was, I think, the academy manager at Arsenal, and he was well aware of this young kid, Aiden McGeady. And, Arsenal would have taken him, Man United, Liverpool, they would have all taken him. And I think that's what I was getting at. From a young age, he was almost a generational talent. He came through, had a fantastic career. It would have been better for me if he did that, at the very, very top level for Celtic, the Champions League season after season. But we got good money for him as well. In terms, I'm going to bring up Barry McCluskey, who I think makes an excellent point in relation to this. The top 5 is easy for Celtic Academy graduates. A top 10 is far more difficult. And I think that speaks volumes, because the 5 I mentioned, who else you got in there? Well, obviously, Tony Ralston would be in mind. Who else you got in that top 10 that have come through and really made their mark? I mean, is there a...
Ross Wallace.
Ross Wallace, again, did pretty well. I mean, who else?
Jamie Smith, maybe.
Stephen
Welch.
Stephen McManus would be in there. McManus would be in there. Absolutely. Captained the club. I guess what you would do, right, is you would get a list of all the young players, and I'll probably do this, all the young players that have broken through in the last 20 years, and show me a list of appearances. And it would be roughly the top 10 appearances would roughly be the top 10 best players. I don't, Darren O'Day, I'm not sure, he was in and out, wasn't he? He scored in a cup final.
McManus in the Champions League knockout at San Siro, so could have been that bad.
The one that could have been, the guy that could have been, I think, would be John Kennedy. Mm-hmm. He was the one that could have been the player, but we know what happened with his injuries as well.
On the Aiden McGeady one, his retirement gives me the fear because he was always the one. He's the same age as me. He's like a couple of months older than me. Mm-hmm. So whenever I seen him making his debut for Celtic, I was like, oh man, that's my opportunity gone. Is
that the football career over now, Sean?
That's it. Yeah, I knew I was gone. I was never going to be a pro at that point. And he was obviously. I went to school in East Kilbride, so you're always one step removed from people like that. So there was always stories going around. Like there was a story, and hopefully he can confirm if this is true or not. But the story was that he had an Adidas contract at quite a young age, like 10 or something. And then at some point, 12, 13, Adidas apparently ripped up his contract. And the story goes that his dad took a video of him doing keepy-ups with a football, and then down to a tennis ball, then down to a golf ball or something along those lines. Sent that video into Adidas, who then renewed his contract. I'd love if that was the story that went around my school, and I'd love if someone can tell me if that's true or not. But that was certainly my memory of him before he even played a game for Celtic. People were talking about him within my age group.
Yeah, there's a right buzz around Aiden McGeady from a very, very young age. His dad, of course, played as well. He was a professional. He played at Sheffield United alongside a certain Jimmy Johnston, incredibly enough. And Aiden McGeady has retired. Hopefully at some point he'll be on the show, maybe on the live stage. But you mentioned Adidas, and I'm going to have to throw this in there. The man scrolling across the bottom of your screen at the moment, John Collins, was the first player ever to score a goal wearing a pair of the original Adidas Predator football boots. You remember that, 1994?
For anyone or for Celtic? For Celtic or for anyone?
Worldwide.
Worldwide? Okay.
They had them in the German HQ fairly recently because they were celebrating the 30th anniversary of the launch of that boot, and they got him to sign, I think, the boot he was wearing to go into the museum at Adidas HQ, and that was the reason why, because he was the guy who scored the first goal wearing a pair of Adidas Preds. And I remember the buzz around it, guys. I'm a wee bit older than you two. I remember the buzz around that boot being released. There was a documentary on the TV, and it was Craig Johnston, the ex-Liverpool player, the Australian ex-Liverpool player. And he devised this incredible concoction on the front of a shoe, which I think he had used kind of surfing socks and all this kind of stuff, because he thought you could get more power and more bend in the ball, and it was all very quirky, but we all absolutely were up for this Adidas Predator football boot. But the problem was, guys, and this is 1994, they retailed at 120 quid, £120 in 1994, right? So my mother made me a promise that if I passed all my exams, she would buy me a pair, right? And I passed all my exams, and I have still got these Adidas Predator football boots, right? The originals with Craig Johnston's name on the side and all that stuff. And they're quite hard to get. So I'm going to get Collins to sign them when he comes to Gracie's on the 1st of December. And if you buy a ticket, you can go into a draw for a beautiful Adidas Predator football boot signed by the one and only, the class, John Collins. So there you go. There's a nice wee link.
Paul, at that price, your mother must have been awfully confident you weren't going to pass all your exams.
I know, she thought I was thick. I started doing my studying. There we go. Hey, all you need is motivation, Kev. We're talking about Aiden McGeady. He was a tremendous talent that came through, as was, of course, Kieran Tierney. Now, guys, you could probably go back a couple of last year at least, maybe even the last 3 transfer windows, and we have spoken about Kieran Tierney on the show. And every time we do it, we get a wee bit of flack saying, get over it, this is turning into Paddy Roberts time, times 2, etc. We could never afford them, the transfer, the wages structure, all this kind of stuff. But we did hear in the pre-season, Kevin, that Kieran Tierney was the number 1 target for Brendan Rodgers. That was a player that would have been the first through the door. He got injured for Scotland, as we all know. He's now been told he's allowed to leave Arsenal in January. And then, of course, Brendan and Kieran are seen last Friday at the foundation dance a week ago, joking and laughing and having other wee in-jokes and everything else, Kev. Do you think it's going to happen? Do you think Kieran Tierney will come back to Celtic?
I think he will come back to Celtic, but I'm not sure it's going to happen this window or the next. I've just got a feeling that Tierney's a Celtic man, in my view. I think he's a real proper Celtic fan. He left when he did because, other than achieving the 10, which ultimately we didn't get, he'd won every single thing there was to win for us that was realistic at that time, and he'd done it multiple times. He kind of had to go and challenge himself at a different level. But I've always had the opinion that he would want to come back and end his career.
That's not personal. No. Every time we speak about Katie, we get the Zs. We get the Zs.
Get the Zs. Yeah, well, I'll keep it short then. Or I'll keep it going, actually, just to annoy everyone. He's a player I've always thought would come back and end his career with us, but he would give us a few years before getting towards his senior days as a footballer. So I think he will come back. I'm not sure if it will be in the next window or the summer, but you never know. If he does come back just now, you've got to have the guarantee, though, that he's fairly fit, because I think the last 2-3 seasons have just been kind of wrecked by injuries. And if he does come back, he will be on a fair wage. He'll be the highest paid player at the club, or one of, and we probably can't afford to have that level of player not playing for us. So, yeah, like I say, I'm sure he'll come back, but whether it's now or in a year or two's time, I don't know.
Right, see, this is the thing, and the reason I brought that up, because we always get this every time we speak about Tierney, but there is something in it. This is the point. And, we were speaking about it in the summer because the plan was to sign him. How they were going to structure that financially, Sean, I have no idea. I have no idea how they were going to do that. Obviously, we brought in Alex Baye. We've got a situation at the moment where Greg Taylor hasn't signed a new deal. He's out injured at the moment, and hopefully we'll get an update on that as well today when Brendan Rodgers speaks to the press. And the other left back that we have, not forgetting Adam Montgomery, is of course Alexandro Bernabe, who's doing pretty well in Brazil, and it looks as though they may turn that move permanent come January, because that loan deal expires, I think, on the 31st of December. Right, Tierney, give us your rundown on it, Sean. Do we need to get over it? Do we need to put him in the same bracket as Paddy Roberts, or do we do the deal?
Probably file under, I don't know, Charlie Nicholas, something like that, right? I think he's probably had his best games for us, but Kieran Tierney at 80% of what he was before is better than Vi and Taylor, so it's an upgrade if we can get it. This over talk about the injury thing is very curious. If it was some Japanese 27-year-old that wasn't getting a game at Arsenal and had a couple of injuries in the past, nobody would be mentioning it. I think we're all just kind of. I think the injury chat is overcooked a bit. He'll get a medical and he'll be fine if he passes the medical. I'm not concerned about that. But yeah, the emotional pool allows us to access a player that's a higher ability than we otherwise would be able to access, and someone who would be taking a wage cut due to that emotional pool. So if it's a possibility, we should be pursuing it. And I think there's no question that he does have that emotional pool. So keep pulling at that, and get the squad the best we can. That's all we really care about, isn't it?
Absolutely. Now, I think you've confirmed and clarified this before, Sean, but if we were to sign a player in January, any player, and we are still in the hunt for the playoffs in the Champions League, which I hope we will be, even though we took a scalping in Dortmund, when do the new signings get into the squad? When do we re-register the squad? Is it for the playoffs or is it for the actual knockouts?
It would be after the knockouts. So, for the knockouts. So it wouldn't be after the Aston Villa game, basically. We can make 3 changes to the squad.
Right, interesting. So, Kieran Tierney, Champions League squad, there you go. Have we still got the number 63? I think so. Sean Maloney, Kieran says would be, Keith Allen, obviously, is what I was thinking when I saw your name, Kieran, apologies. Vindaloo. Sean Maloney would be in the top 10, and potentially top 5. David Marshall, I mean, how often do we produce a goalie? Not that often. And David Marshall came in, you'll remember the Barcelona game as being his coming of age, if you like, and eventually leaving for Norwich to be managed by Peter Grant. Will McMillan points out our list over the last 20 years, and I've been threatening to do this list over the last 20 years. I need to get around to doing it. Has been pretty average. And I think once you've got the list, you've got to then compare it to similarly sized sides all over Europe and say, is this normal, or are we kind of below what we would expect to be producing? AR comes in to say, did Predator wear Predator boots? I never checked because he was always kind of like invisible, so I'll need to have a look at that. But I do know that some of the scenes actually involved Jean-Claude Van Damme in the suit, and he was uncredited because he fell out with him. Barry McCluskey, I remember an April Fool's for a Predator headband for improving headers. I can't remember that, but that is absolutely off the scale pattern if that's what they did. That's brilliant. And then we get other people's eras. It's almost as if you can virtually guess their kind of era based on the boots they wore, right? So Jay Conley, Jay Larkin, Stylo Matchmakers were my favourites. Guys, you have not heard the Stylo Matchmakers, have you? These are too young.
Not a clue, no.
I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I'm sure Georgie Best was part of the advertising campaign for that. Maybe even wee Jinky. Stuart Ramsey, I had a pair of Adidas Beckenbauer. Adidas Santiago, says Robert Highland, and Copa Mundial, say Barry McCluskey. A lot of people swear by them to this day. Boots, PJ, match worn down the park. John, I used to just walk about the house with them, man. They were too expensive to wear in a competitive game. So, yes, they're going to be in very good condition. And we've also got Stay in School, says Mark Nisbet. Yeah, but the motivation of getting a pair of Preds made me stick in and get those 7 standard grades or whatever it was back in the day. Mark Nisbet also comes in to say McGeady had the most natural ability. I totally agree. And Henrik, this is proper OCD CSC. Doesn't like me in the top right. I didn't play left back, to be fair. That's just because Sean was early to the party. Now, if we're talking about people coming back to the football club, And on that note, Henrik Larsson, it's been announced, is coming back to Celtic for an evening to launch his new book that's been released by Celtic, Sean. And people have noted from time to time that I might like a Celtic book DVD or video. And I was having a wee look at this before we came on. So when Henrik was a player at Celtic, we released 2 videos. Remember the big black plastic things, the VHS video cassettes? One of them was called Tongue in Cheek, which was his first 100 goals for Celtic. Another one was called The Player's Player, with a free poster. There were also DVDs to throw into the mix. The Boy Who Would Be King, and then Total Larsson. And then followed by 4 books: A Season in Paradise, The Official Tribute, You Are My Larsson, and Thanks for the Memories. This for a player who played for 7 years at Celtic and was also granted a testimonial before he left, some kind of benefit game. I don't know if it's classed as a testimonial, but there's a new book and there's an evening with Henrik Larsson. Sean, you're up there, you're representing Acsom in the media duties. What one question do you ask Henrik?
Oh, now you're asking. Put me on the spot here. I'd probably ask, first question comes to my mind is, why did you shave the dreadlocks?
Why did you shave the dreads?
It just seemed so random.
I know.
It was just so randomly done out of the blue. And it was so iconic. And I think Celtic probably had to burn a lot of merchandise at that point. Yeah.
It was iconic. It was iconic. You're right. The wee Pro Stars figures, the whole thing, the masks. And it was against Aberdeen he scores in the first game back and he starts pointing at the bald Napa. Yeah. Right. Good question. Why did you do it? I think I would follow that question up by saying, where are they? Because they should be in a museum. Kevin, one question to ask the King of Kings.
I was hoping I dodged this one when you went to Sean first.
At least you got about a minute to think about your answer.
I know, and I've still not got a good one.
What was your favourite John Collins goal?
Yes.
And why is it the one against Rangers? It would probably be something around that goal against St Johnstone, the first goal when under the Janssen season, in the first season. Like, did he understand the significance of that goal? I think, and what it meant to everyone. Something quite serious along those lines.
Yeah, this is the thing, right? We were with Big John on Wednesday, John Hartson. The show goes out tonight at 7 o'clock. This is Acsom. No, 6 o'clock. Sorry, 6 o'clock. This is Acsom. And so get the popcorn out. But going into these interviews, I spoke about this yesterday a wee bit, and this is Acsom. We don't want it to be like an interview. It's just more of a discussion. So it's not Q&A. Because if you do that, I think what happens is you end up having the same content as everybody else. Because if you think John Hartson, West Ham, for example, Sean, you think Berkovic kicking him in the face. And it's like, right, how often has that been asked? How many times has John given his answer? Do you really want to do it again? Because it's the same as before. So you hopefully approach it from a slightly different angle. So with that in mind, every time someone speaks to Tosh McKinlay, they asked Tosh about headbutting Henrik up at Barrowfield on the eve of a Rangers game, right? Can you remember? He broke his nose. And I
remember they weren't allowed to report it. And it was just rumours that spread it around because they weren't allowed to put it on the paper.
Back in the day, that's the way it worked. Nowadays, everything would be out within a split second. Has anybody ever asked Henrik his side of the story? Because I thought at the time, he broke his nose. He actually broke his nose. And then I think he had to go back to Sweden for a family bereavement and then come back to Scotland. The Rangers game was the game that they beat us 1-0. Richard Gough scored the goal. And he was giving it all the 10 fingers in the air for 10 in a row. How did that one go for you, Richard? So yes, maybe I would ask Henrik the question about Tosh breaking his nose. Now, team groups, here we go. Team groups are always a big thing growing up as a kid because they were on the front of your calendar that you always got for Christmas, Sean. Celtic team group, beautiful new kits, all the new signings, and then, of course, the trophies that you had won in front of the team group. So growing up, normally the team group didn't have any trophies for my first something like 8 years or something supporting Celtic. Same. I noticed yesterday that it's become tradition now that the team group is up at Lennoxtown. So there's that beautiful backdrop and it's all the mountainous areas and all that. I would prefer it to be at Celtic Park. But the other thing I noticed is the omission of a certain Odin Holm. Odin Holm is not in the team group, Sean. He's also not in the Champions League squad, and he's not been in the matchday squad for some time. Am I looking too much into this? Is Odin Holm's career at Celtic maybe winding down? Is he on his way out?
That is a few coincidences. I do agree with what you're saying. It should be at Celtic Park. But that is a couple of coincidences in a row. It might be perfectly innocent. It might be in a way getting treatment. It might be in some prior engagement. But that is a couple of coincidences, because I'm sure I've not actually seen the squad photo you're talking about. I'm sure Adam Montgomery's in it and people like that. So there might be. Is James McCarthy in it? There's the question.
He's taking a picture.
So James McCarthy and Odin Holm are behind the camera, like holding up the birdies for everyone to smile at. Yeah, it doesn't look good, does it? If he's not out on loan in January, I'd say he's probably gone by next summer. That's not a good look.
You're talking about like a number of coincidences. A lot of people don't think there's such a thing. The other one I would throw into the mix would be after one of the pre-season games where Brendan Rodgers actually pinpointed Boston Lawal and Odin Holm as two guys that really need to do a lot more, Kevin. So I think if you start joining up the dots, you think to yourself, is there a career here at Celtic Park for Odin Holm? Is he going to go the same way as a lot of the signings during that transfer window last summer, and he'll leave the club either permanently or on a loan? It's not looking good for the young guy, is it?
It's really not, no. And it doesn't seem like it's all just coincidence. It seems like there's probably something behind it, although I'll admit that's pure speculation because I know nothing. But, like you say, joining up the dots, it doesn't really look good for him. Even if he's considered to be a fringe player on very much in the outskirts of the team, you have him in that photo. So it's quite damning in a way to see that he's not there. And I remember those comments that Rodgers had made during the pre-season about Lawal and about Holm. One's gone, one's out the building, the other one's not seen. He was in the same carpool as Liam Shaw, and he's gone as well. So yeah,
at least we got an announcement. At least we got an announcement for Shaw, or did we? Or was it Fleetwood?
Fleetwood made the announcement on our behalf, I think.
Right.
But yeah, it's not looking good for him, and it's a shame because he's a player that I think anyways got loads of ability, big potential, but we're not playing him. We should have him out on loan if he's somebody that we think is a long-term future with us. We didn't put him out during the summer. So, yeah, it doesn't look good for him.
That's one of the points I think that is most pertinent here, Kev, right? I remember when we signed him, James Mackenzie did a bit of research on him, and I think he'd maybe appeared in one of these lists that you get, European Golden Boys or whatever it is.
Guardian
like
100. Yeah.
442 used to be good at doing that, and they would pinpoint youngsters coming through from all over the globe, kind of do the scouting work for everybody else. And so he was highly rated. He'd played something like 80 or 90 senior games of football in Norway, and we signed him as a 19-year-old. So he had that first team football. He had worked very early doors with Ronnie Dylo over there as well. And I think the key thing here is the fact that if you're not in the Champions League squad, Kev, and you're not loaned out in January, there's nothing else for you. There really isn't. If you're not in the first team, because you're then in that purgatory, you're in that no man's land of Scottish football where you can't play for the B team, you're not getting in the first team squad, you're just training. You're never getting a game.
Yeah, even if he did play for the B team, going down to the Lowland League, there's nothing for somebody like him. That's for our 17, 18, 19-year-olds that you might think have some sort of potential in future, but for him, he's 2021 now. He's got almost 100 games of experience before he's come to us. He's too good for that. He's too good to not play. And sadly, we're going to waste him otherwise. And sorry for interrupting, Sean. I'll let you go.
No, it was your floor. Sorry, I was just trying to get a point in. I had to say caution that these are the exact same things we said about Liam Scales at one point in time.
Yeah. They absolutely what I'd love. And the thing is, when he came in, there was a bit of I'm not going to say a bad attitude, but there was a bit of an edge about Odin Holm. We spoke about it, Kev, where he came on against Aberdeen up at Pittodrie, did pretty well, but then it was all about the social media afterwards. He got a bit of criticism for that. So yeah, it would be good to be clarified. I mean, it's the type of thing. I'm not in the press conference clearly today. I've not been invited. But I would maybe ask that question. All right, Brendan, how's James McCarthy getting on? Apparently, James McCarthy is training with Hamilton. Apparently, that's what we've heard. He's actually training with Hamilton to keep himself fit. I'm guessing he's still on the lookout for a new club. But in relation to Odin Holm, guys disappeared from view. Mr. Whip 55, we will coast the game if we score early. The team always plays well after a quick goal. James Devine. Paul John, I hope your favourite player, the Bricky, didn't pick up an injury. Right, I'm going to ask you guys, I'm going to ask Sean first thing, and again give Kevin a wee bit of thinking time. Where does the Bricky appear in the top 10 Celtic graduates from the last 2 decades? And also a player we've not even mentioned, Mikey Johnston. Where does he appear?
Mikey Johnston doesn't really break the list for me, but Bricky's definitely in there. He's probably top 6, top 7, I'd say. Yeah, he's comfortably in there. There's not, like you said, it's a pretty sparse list. And Ralston's been at the club. He must be pushing a testimonial. I still remember watching him play for Queen's Park back in the day when he was 16, 17. So yeah, he's been around. He played against Neymar, whatever, in 2015, was it? Something like that. So he is pretty close to a testimonial. I'd say he is, as much as he's somewhat a squad player, and as for the vast majority he's been a squad player, he's definitely a worthy graduate to be considered as a success story of the academy.
Well, here's the thing. We were speaking about him before the Scotland game, and I think he got some kind of plaudits for his performance against Portugal. But we were talking about the fact, Kevin, that if you look at this season, this is the 10th season that Tony Ralston has been part of Celtic's first team squad. And in that 10 seasons, he's played for the first team. And of course, as Sean was saying there's been loan deals. So he spent a fair bit of time away from Celtic at Queen's Park, St Johnstone and Dundee United. But he has only played 106 times for Celtic, not all starts in those 10 seasons, which shows you the type of Celtic career that he's had. You know, there was that high point, I think, under Ange Postecoglou in season number 1 under Ange, where he's played 40-odd games. And that more or less makes up the entirety of all the other 8 or 9 seasons that he's played at Celtic Football Club. But I do regard him as a very important player. Where would he appear in that top 10 list? Would he appear above Stephen McManus? Probably not, because McManus was a captain of a successful team that won a double under Gordon Strachan. Would he appear above Mikey Johnston? There's a different type of question for you, Kevin McCluskey.
So, to the question that you asked, Sean, I agree with almost every word that you'd said on that one. So you answered that one on my behalf as well. Thank you. I would put McManus, he's outside the top 5, just outside, so he's probably number 6. And then Ralston will be 7th in the list. Mikey Johnston doesn't make it for me. And I can rationalise that one out by going that every single time Tony Ralston has pulled on a Celtic jersey, he's given 110% of him, whatever his ability level was at the time, because we know his first few seasons he maybe wasn't the player that he's become. You know, he was a bit of a joke figure. We all wanted rid of him at one point again. But he gave us 110% every time. He plays with his heart in his sleeve. He's been that kind of Mr. Reliable in that way, that if the number 1 right back is out, you couldn't ask for a better, deputy to come in. He loves the club. This is where he wants to be. He's improved as a footballer, and I think he's really shown his worth to the club over the decade or so that he's been here. And he's chipped in with a few pretty important goals in his time as well.
Yeah.
I think that one up at Ross County a few years ago. So he's had his big moments for us. He's not just a guy that comes in and takes a jersey for a game to let Johnson get a rest. He's worthy of being there. So that's why I'd have him there. And Mikey Johnston, he's a poor man's Aiden McGeady on that one. Another one that had loads of natural ability, frustrated the hell out of you, but never really seemed to have the heart to go on and make it. The moment for him, I'll always go back to, is it Ferencváros away? We're 3-1 up, we're really coasting the game. He tries to run it out from the back, loses it, gives up. They score and make it 3-2, and it gave them hope that they could get a draw. And that for me was Mikey Johnston in a nutshell. Had the ability, didn't have a football brain, to be fair, and just frustrated the hell out of me. So for me, he wouldn't make a top 10.
I wonder where Mikey Johnson, or how he's getting on. I've never actually looked at how he's got on since he moved permanently. Is he playing?
I don't know. I also wonder how he rates me as within the top 10 of Acsom contributors. That would be interesting to know.
Well, that's I will ask him if I ever get the opportunity.
Please do,
and I'll tell you if you're in the top 20. We've only got 20, but we'll see if you're in the top 20, right? Some great points coming through here, and I totally agree with this, that Joe Hamilton comes in and he's right, and we've not actually mentioned this. The Bricky is the cult kind of hero. The guy, it's hard to define a cult, right? And I think that
no, it's not. If you went, your definition's Paddy McCourt, and work your way back from there.
Just a picture of Paddy. So, don't try and explain it. Just a picture of Paddy McCourt. There you go. Yeah, aye, you're right. It's easy to define a cult. Just a picture of Paddy. AJSC Tech. I bet you Scales loves classic. I don't know where this has come from, but I like it. Loves classic rock music and folk music. Scales is the anti-hipster. He's probably the only guy that still buys the 50 disc compilation rock playlists and set lists, big box sets. Aye, I can see that. He probably wears leather jackets as well and all that kind of stuff. Stephen Murray, Tony Ralston, a local lad from Bells Hill, like our great captain from 1967, and Jason Cassidy. Hi Paul, this is an important one, a serious one for a moment. We are trying to organise a minute's applause on Saturday against Aberdeen on the 26th minute for my father, Jim Cassidy, who passed away. He was a massive Celtic fan who lived in Slane in Ireland. Jason, sorry for your loss, and hopefully we can. And we'll share that, of course, on the socials as well. And hopefully we're able to do that during the game against Aberdeen. Celtic boy 1993, not the best year for Celtic. We always do this with players. Classic example, we're talking about Odin Holm here, of using data but not mentality. Only half decent game he's had is in versus Bucky. Anyone who changes their name legally to Iago is an instant no.
It's a fair point.
I know, but I am Paul John Henrik Dyke. So are you saying no to me?
Did you change it? Or did you giving it?
Absolutely. Start following and informed. Nobody questions you. Players that still want to represent their countries, if they didn't, they would never play. Yeah, they do. I think there's a professional pride, and I think we would all be the same. If once you get in, you never ever want to go out. So absolutely, there is that. I'm just selfish when it comes to Celtic and watching Celtic with CCV back and a full strength defence. Kyogo, Kuhn, Maeda up front. We should win convincingly, says James. Kill the game off in the first 45 minutes. Job done. Move on. I hope you're right. But we've been talking about home. Let's talk about the midfield then, Sean. It's one area of the park whereby we do have a lot of talented players. Who do you play against Aberdeen? Who starts?
Yeah, you go full strength. But then the point there is, what is full strength? Because the Ross County game, if you were basing it on that, you'd say the midfield three that finished rather than the midfield three that started. So I guess there's a strong argument for Luke McCowan to get a start. But then, I don't know. Like the other players have got a larger body of work behind them, like Vio Tati. I've not been impressed with Vio Tati this season, to be honest. So far, he's had some good moments, but obviously scores that great goal. But I think he's been up and down, and a lot more down than I would like. So for me, it would probably be McCowan and Engels. Yeah, tough one. I know Engels was stinking against Ross County, but again, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't have an answer here, unfortunately, that's any good. But I think McCowan has probably earned it a little bit, and you almost have to reward that, especially since he's not been travelling. Whereas Engels, Bernardo, and Hatate all have travelled. So McCowan and McGregor, the ones that haven't done any travelling, feels like a good way to get energy into the midfield.
It's a good shout. Kev, does McCowan get his first competitive start for Celtic against Aberdeen in what I have called our biggest domestic test of the season?
Yeah, well, until Sean spoke there, I was going to say no, but you made a really convincing argument for him. And part of it being that he's going to bring the fresh legs that without having travelled and played in the last couple of weeks with the national team. But I'm still tempted that you go with, obviously, McGregor's in there. He's undroppable. And then I would go Engels and Bernardo, because on paper I still think that is the strongest midfield three that we've got. But if either one of those two was to drop out for McCowan, I don't think I would have any real complaints, because when he came off the bench against Ross County a couple of weeks back, he was part of the increase in tempo and desire that we showed in the second half of that game. He was a big part in that, and every time he's come off the bench, he has looked impressive. He's due a start at some point, but I'm still leaning towards Engels and Bernardo for this game.
See, the thing with me is that is the midfield that I'm choosing, but I'm going against some of my instincts, one of which being choose the players who are on the best form, because if you do that, McCowan plays, and Sean's right. But I've picked Bernardo, Engels and McGregor, so I'm now asking, why have I picked Engels when he's not having great form? Maybe it's part of his introduction to the Celtic team to play through maybe a sticky patch of form. Can we afford to do that against Aberdeen? These are all the dilemmas, actually, that Brendan Rodgers will be facing. Bernardo as well. I think Bernardo's been excellent this season. Hatate's my favourite midfield player, but I'm not playing him because it's a hit or a miss at the moment. You just don't know what you're going to get from Rio Hatate. He can be the game changer and the playmaker and all these different titles that we've levied upon him. However, you just don't know if you're going to get it. So I would start, I think it's maybe playing it safe. It's a bit of a cop-out. I would start with Bernardo, McGregor and Engels. But I think what you've got on the bench is McCowan, who's playing great form, buzzing to go, and you've got Hatate who can come on, and if he's in the mood and the game's right for him, he can turn it. He can absolutely turn it. Let us know in the comments section, who is your midfield three? We're now going to be talking about Pyros. Sean, no Pyro, no party. Celtic have been hit with another fine by UEFA, €20,000, and issued with a suspended away ban. It's a 2-year suspended ban. The first thing I'm going to ask, do fines and bans work? And also, should we maybe start working with ultra fan groups to find a way that allows them to have Pyro safely at the football?
Yeah, and look at probably as bored as anyone with this back and forward between the authorities and fans around the Pyro. Fans want a spectacle, they want to enjoy their day out, and the authorities want to keep people safe. And for some reason, they're just going at each other instead of finding a way to compromise and do it safely, which is what you're talking about there, Paul. It is beyond any logic to me. One of the boys in our Celtic Down Under chat, I should probably give him credit, did some research on this and said that they've been doing it. It was Willie Ennis. He said they've been doing it safely in Norway for the last 10 years, where the fire brigade and the police all come together with the fans and they plan it all in advance to get safe pyrotechnics organised. It would just obviously be beyond the SFA to do something proactive and constructive that benefits the game and makes it more of a spectacle. But I can live and dream, right?
Well, the thing is, I'm just amazed that we've not done it yet. It's one of the things that Safe Pyro is out there, and Kevin Graham's spoken about it a lot. Kevin, I think, has been known to purchase some pyrotechnics, but not for the football, for artistic purposes, for his Celtic Cross Collective and poetry, etc. And he was telling me that there is a way of doing it safely, and it's about engagement for me, Kev. You engage with your fan base. We should be doing it anyway with the ultra groups that we've got, who add a lot to Celtic Park. And I just think, let's embrace it and engage with them and find some kind of middle ground. Let them do it and do it safely.
Yeah, 100%. It's the most logical approach that you can have, which is probably why Sean said SFA won't do it, because it makes a lot of sense. I can understand there is another side of the argument where you'll go, pyrotechnics might not be the safest thing in the world. You might personally not like them, so you might not want to be next to somebody that has one and is letting one off during the game. Well, this is where, like you say, you need to cooperate with everyone. Fan groups, ultras groups, clubs, authorities, and that's football and legislative authorities, whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Just get down, discuss this one and find out a safe way that you can have it. We can finally get that Celtic wall if we want. And within that, there is a section where we have pyrotechnics going, and that becomes such a huge spectacle. So again, like Sean says, you make it an entertainment. It's a great TV spectacle as well, because that's what's going to get shown and broadcast around the world. When you're at the game, when you're in those zones, it's amazing. I'm pretty fortunate over here that it's fairly lax in these things. So I've been in a few games and away ends and whatnot, and the pyrotechnics are going off. And I don't understand a lot of what's going on, but the atmosphere is amazing. It makes you feel a part of something. So if you're there and that's what you like, 100% is a way that you can make that safe without also stealing the enjoyment of the people that are in that section. So it has to happen sooner or later. And yeah, Sean's given examples. It happens in Scandinavia, and it has done for decades or a decade. You know, we can bring their philosophy of that into our game and just create such a bigger and better spectacle.
I agree with you. We're going to be talking very briefly about the structure because we have done a fair bit of that this week in relation to the football department. But in the past, we have spoken about having fan representation on the board. And I think that things like this bring it into view. By the way, if I was to vote for a fan to be the fan representative, it would be Bernard Ponsonby. Unbelievable talker who just gets it. He knows what it means to be a Celtic fan. And the whole idea of this is that there would be ongoing dialogue between fans, fan groups, supporters, clubs, individuals with this representative who would be able to obviously impart all that information and suggestions and all that kind of stuff as some kind of focal point. So yeah, cult player Kieran Allen. Listen, before I say this, Kieran, Sean said it best. The definition of a cult player is a picture of Paddy McCourt. I tried to explain, I think it was for one of my books, what a cult player was. So here is my take on it, Kieran. A cult player is an undoubted natural talent who underachieves, often through drink, bad diet, partying, womanizing, etc. Yes, Kevin McCluskey, I'm looking at you. Or
yeah, I was going to say this. You're just describing me.
Yeah, that was your football career in a nutshell. Or there's three. I think there's three examples. Or it could be a player with limited ability, the brickie, who would run through a brick wall, pardon the pun, for the team, and who often ends up achieving far more than the better players. You look at the trophies that Tony Ralston's won. Or there's a third one, I can't even remember what this is, so it will probably surprise me. Someone who has no prior connection to the football club, but who builds a relationship with the fan base, often through aspects beyond football. I think who I was talking about there was somebody like Mika Lustig, who does have the talent. So it's not like he's not talented. He has lived his life properly and maximised his career, but he's kind of often looked at as a cult because of his relationship with the fans. Would you subscribe to those three definitions, Sean, or do you just want to stick with the picture of Paddy?
Oh, picture of Paddy's number one, but yeah, I think you're also referring to like Jota doing the jinky thing, and you know whenever Wanyama getting the number 67, sorry, that sort of thing. I think is what you're kind of leaning to there when players don't show up as just mercenaries and they play for the club and not just on the pitch to make business decisions and further their career.
No, I think
Samaras is another example of that one. I think could have moved away and enhanced his bank balance, but stayed and had the relationship with WJ as well, and connected with the fans.
Yeah, he did. You're right. There's a connection right there. I remember he gave WJ Beattie the medal, didn't he? And he walked around doing the lap of honour. I mentioned Mikey Johnson earlier on. He has played 5 games this season for West Brom, and you remember when he went down on loan. And he was tearing it up, scoring goals and assists and all that. He's played 5 games, no goals, no assists, right? So that's Mikey Johnson. Kevin Graham, poet, our very own. Gary Caldwell managed his 100th game for Exeter last night. No great point, but a lot of managers don't last that long down there. You're right. And didn't Kevin also say that he substituted Jack Aitchison off for Exeter? He was another Celtic Academy graduate.
He dropped Aitchison for the game.
Or did he drop it?
He
dropped him. Yeah. He's probably only about 18 now anyway, Jack. Plenty of time to come back from that, right? We did talk quite extensively, guys, about the restructuring the Celtic behind the scenes, the introduction of Paul Tisdale, the fact that we now have a head of football operations. Kev, what was your take on all of that? You think it's a good move?
I do think it's a good move, yeah. I think it's about time we had someone in that kind of position to oversee the overall football structure of the club. I've watched the same videos that everyone else will have watched, the Tisdale's interviews before. He's going to be a guy that will divide opinion. I quite liked him. I liked what he had to say. He's clearly a guy that knows the game. He's been involved at a lower level, of course, but he's got good ideas. He's been very successful where he's been before, and his big thing has always been developing players, identifying talent, developing the talent, selling it on at a profit. And that's what we're all about. So there's a lot of good things there. And he comes into the club as a a really disruptive influence, which I think is a good thing to have, because he's going to shake up the status quo, or I hope anyway, he gets the opportunity to shake up the status quo of what's been going on in the background, because we're sitting here this afternoon really, really racking our brains to come up with 10 quality academy graduates that have come through in the last 20 years. And we're struggling. We're struggling to find players that have played more than 50 games for us. So part of his remit should be to make sure that in 20 years' time, we can have the same conversation, but we're actually struggling to narrow it down to 10 players because we've actually started to produce our own again.
No, brilliant. Actually, it brings the whole conversation full circle, doesn't it, Sean? We do need to start looking at the academy, and it can't be every so often. I mean, even the guys we've got at the moment in the team, Callum McGregor, James Forrest, Stephen Welsh, Tony Ralston, they're no 18, 19 years of age. These guys are well into their 20s, so it's almost like we've missed a right good few crops coming through, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely. It is disappointing, but we have been getting harvested quite regularly. But that's not to say we can't do more. And it's a chicken and egg thing, right? If we give more pathway, then we keep more talent. So it's, one of those things.
Harvesting crops and chickens, it's all farmer chat today, lads. I know I'm from Fife, right? It'd be seeping into
Just
your...
make you feel at home.
Don't get too excited, Paul.
100%. Listen, it does look as though Sean's ready for his bed. It looks as though Kevin's ready for that. Are you in under caution? Is it an under caution interview you're getting in there, Kev?
It is indeed, mate. Aye. Yes.
All right. Sorry to cut into your 6 hours or whatever you get over in Hungary. But both these might be in for a lie down. Who knows? Give me a prediction, though. I'm going to start with yourself, Sean. A prediction for the game against Aberdeen, our biggest domestic test of the season, in my view.
I think 3-1. Celtic.
3-1 Celtic. Nice. I'd be more than happy with that. Kev?
Similar winning margin, but I'm going to go 2-0.
2-0. And I've said all week, 2-1 Celtic. I think it's going to be a tough one, but we'll get through. We've got enough quality. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. If you want to win a Adidas Predator signed by John Collins, the guy that scored the first goal wearing one, it's an original for 94, then you will be put into a prize draw if you buy a ticket to see Collins on the 1st of December. Come along, get involved in the old Acsom live thing, meet a few of the Acsom contributors, have a right good time and amongst people with a similar state of mind. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to Sean and Kevin for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.